Hi folks, my name is Linda Emmett and welcome to Happiness is an Inside Job. We are the creators of our own reality, we create our own lives. Our mind is our biggest limit and it's our own beliefs, behaviours and habits constantly caught in those cycles that keep us trapped where we are and stand in the way of our own happiness. So throughout this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into some of those beliefs, habits and patterns, where they show up in your lives and what you can do to change them. Hi there Noodles, and on this week's podcast I want to take a deep dive into something that hits us all so much in our lifetime. I think it's a very important one to talk about, and that's loneliness. And loneliness is a feeling, or can be felt, even when we're surrounded by people and you feel completely isolated and alone. That's loneliness. And being alone and feeling lonely are two very different things. Loneliness is it's a painful emotion, very painful, and loneliness is hardwired into our biology to trigger us to change. That's why it's there, because we're not built or made to be alone. And although we all love at times having our own space, that's very, very different. That's very different to wanting some time on your own to process, to think, to breathe, to do you. That's perfectly normal, but loneliness itself, that's hardwired in to move us into change. We get pangs of loneliness when we need to change how we're living. And if we're not changing how we're living, that's when it really can set in on us. And often we stop connecting because we become so busy being busy that we often neglect our social bonds and our relationships. And we forget or don't understand that they are a primal need for us. We are biologically fine-tuned to be with other humans. When you think of even a baby being born, a baby from birth, we need people to learn to speak, talk, walk, to feed us. We need people from birth. And although when we become adults, our needs are different, we still need people at our very core for our happiness and well-being. They've done a number of large-scale studies across the globe showing that loneliness is one of the most unhealthy things that we can experience as humans. We age much quicker, it takes us longer to recover from illness, and we stop thriving, and we're only surviving when we're innately lonely. And they've done a number of studies across the pandemic, because that hit all of us hard in many different spaces, and they realised that we were moving into a very different pandemic of loneliness. And it really showed up in the likes of our old age, our old folks' homes, different places like that. And I've mentioned this before, they did a study across many prisons in America where it showed that even though the population of prisoners in isolation only accounted for 5% of the entire prison population, that 5% accounted for 50% of the suicides, because we do not do well in isolation. Our brain, our well-being, our whole system. And unfortunately for us, the longer we are lonely, the less we actually interact with people, because we're feeling sad, because we're lonely. And then even when we're around people, we can feel disconnected or isolated. So working on that within our lives and looking at spaces that we're feeling lonely is really, really powerful in enhancing and helping our own well-being and our own happiness. So looking at first some of the signs that show up in our lives that show us that we are signs that we're lonely. And I'm guilty of a lot of these. Certainly in this year, it showed up in my life, and I will share some of that with you throughout the podcasts. Constant phone scrolling, even when we're surrounded by people. That is very much in this day and age how we deal with and combat our loneliness. And what you'll see a lot is, if you look around, people scrolling on their phones, even in crowds with people, because we've lost the ability to connect, to actually have a conversation with the person beside you. We feel uncomfortable. We're safer, and we feel like we look like we're doing something when we're on our phone. We're not as uncomfortable. And that is a sign that we're lonely. But again, just, not able to connect, feeling that discomfort. And first off, folks, discomfort never killed anybody. You'd never see on someone's tombstone, died of discomfort. It doesn't, but we just don't like feeling uncomfortable. So we avoid, we move away rather than saying hello. And what we forget is, chances are, most of the other people in that room are feeling a level of discomfort too. And connecting within that and talking anyway, it moves us all out of that space. Another sign of loneliness is, when we're living our entire life through a virtual existence, when we're not even so much engaging on social media as we are monitoring and comparing ourselves. I genuinely think we've moved into a space where we've become quite unhealthy with social media. We're not using it so much at times to connect. We're also using it to compare ourselves and to monitor what others are doing and how they're showing up. And that actually makes us feel worse about ourselves. And therefore we retreat. And again, the only place that we're living is in the virtual life, as opposed to out there in our lives. And that adds to our own loneliness. So being mindful of the amount of time that you're on social media, relentlessly scrolling or flicking through or monitoring what others are doing, or comparing yourself to others, judging yourselves by the standards that you see on social media, which only shows a very best version or one slice of what others are doing. And I know we all give out about people putting up pictures of their dinner and everything else, but we're hardwired to watch it. We love a good picture of food. We all have relationships with food. We love a good picture, and that's fine. But it's when we're living our lives virtually and not actually living in our lives, being around people, connecting, bonding, having touch. Touch is so important to us as humans, whether it's a hug, a handshake, whatever it is. We're tactile creatures. Another thing, and here's one I'm guilty of with that arrested, is overly attaching to material possessions. This is a sure sign usually that we're quite lonely. We're constantly buying things to fill that void, to fill up something, getting our comfort from having all those beautiful things around us, or trying to get that dopamine hit, that good feeling from overly attaching ourselves to the material possessions, and then wondering why after you hit that button, you hit buy or add to basket, you're not getting those amazing feelings. And that's certainly one way that I've dealt with points in my life where I was really lonely and I didn't really know what that was. I didn't fully understand where it was coming from. And the last thing that shows up would be, well, the last thing for today on signs of loneliness is regular binge watching TV. And again, folks, just pointing out, all of these things in of themselves, having a scroll and a snoop on social media is fine. Buying yourself something nice, treating yourselves, doing that, that's fine. Sitting down and chilling and having some time off and watching a bit of TV, perfectly fine. But if it's a huge part of your life and you're not feeling good, you're feeling low on yourself, and you're doing it far more than you want to be, and you're binging on these things, this is when there's signs of loneliness. We all nip in and out of doing some of these things, but when it's a regular pattern in your life and you're feeling you're not feeling good and you're using it for something. And deep down, we all know when we're doing that. That is a sign that you are just lonely. That the things that you're binge watching on TV, you're trying to be part of something. You're part of that episode you're watching, or involved in their lives, feeling their emotions, getting them from the screen again, rather than getting them from your own life. And what we can end up doing is we can be chasing stimulation rather than any form of real joy or fulfillment. We can be looking to get those hits off, hitting those buttons or hitting next episode, trying to get that stimulation, those dopamine hits that feel good, rather than the actual joy of doing the things we love and being around people and fulfilling ourselves and working with and through that loneliness and what's driving it. Because again, a lot of it comes from our own negative beliefs, and where it can show up in our lives as well is when we look around and we don't have many meaningful connections, or we don't bother connecting with them or having the real open conversations, having those proper deep chats. When we get ourselves into that space where it's easier not to connect, not to send that text, not to meet up with those people, and staying on surface level where everyone we meet, showing them who we think they want to see rather than who we really are, or deflecting every time they say, how are you? You jump back to, Grandja, how are you? How are you doing? What's going on with you? Not wanting to talk about ourselves. It's learning to open up again, because a lot of the creation of our own loneliness, it stems back to our self-worth. It stems back to us not feeling like we'll be accepted, feeling like we're going to be judged, feeling like we can't connect, or we're a burden, that, people don't want to be around us, or, they don't want to hear what we have to say. That's a lot of it. It stems back to low self-worth, and self-worth needs to be built. It's only something that we learn to build on by doing the things that add happiness and joy to our lives. It's by taking those 4 steps, by stepping back out there, by going to the things that when you walk away from, that you feel great. Be it going to the gym, meeting a friend for coffee, going to a networking meeting, going to that event, going for a bike ride, whatever it is that floats your boat. Connection is what staves off and moves you out of loneliness, because loneliness is a painful, powerful emotion, and we all deserve to have amazing people in our lives, and we all deserve to treat ourselves like we are the amazing person that we know we are, or the person that we're telling ourselves we're aspiring to be. Unfortunately, we often create a lot of our own loneliness because of how we feel about ourselves, basically how we're treating ourselves, abandoning ourselves, telling ourselves that we don't need people. We turn instead to our coping mechanisms. As they say, we're telling ourselves, I don't need people. I don't need to rely or depend on anybody. That's a coping mechanism, and it tends to come from the belief that people will abandon us or let us down. So why bother letting them in the first place? Why bother letting people see who you truly are? They'll reject you, they'll walk away. This is an old pattern and program that is no longer serving you. Stop. It was bad enough you felt that way at any point in your life, when you were a child, when you were growing up. But what's worse is how it's impacting you now. That pattern is still running in the background from an old environment. And it's in there telling you, you're ultra independent, don't need anybody, they can text me, I prefer my own company. They're all coping mechanisms to cope with being lonely, to cope with not wanting to step out of your comfort zone, or to cope with you getting your value from staying in the busy bubble, staying relentlessly busy, doing, getting your value from everything that you're doing rather than who you are. They're all coping mechanisms, and it's stepping out and seeing past them and allowing yourself to be around people, allowing yourself to be seen, allowing yourself to open up play, dance, laugh, do all of those things, lift those limits, lift the lid, and get back out there and be around people. When we become busy, and you know, for me, this is life as it is now. We're very productivity based. We get a lot of our value from what we do. And when we're in that space, we neglect who we truly are, and we neglect what we really need. And we show up as who we think we need to be within society rather than who we truly are. And then we get all those other beautiful coping mechanisms like imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and all of those things. And these only add to the low self-worth. So working on that in the background and knowing that you're worthy of those connections, worthy of being around those people, helps you start moving out of any spaces that you're in that you're not connecting, and trying to feed off your outer environment, off your Netflix, off your numbing, off those behaviours. And it's in the allowing, it's in the willingness, it's in, you know, us setting boundaries. A lot of the time when we're lonely, we can also find ourselves, you know, in situations that we don't really want, like situationships, or staying in an unhealthy relationship, settling. You know, it's okay to set healthy boundaries and decide who you do and don't want to let in, to decide, you know, trust takes time to be built. I'm not saying open up to absolutely, build the relationships again, get back out into space, open yourself up, stop ignoring the text messages, answer the text messages, reach out to people, call those people you've been threatening to call for so long that now you feel a little bit embarrassed or uncomfortable about making those calls. Reach out. Do that for yourself. A tiny bit of discomfort is something you'll only feel for a moment or two until you hear that voice at the end of the phone, or until you get that message back, until you start building that back into your life again. And moving away from, you know, relying on all these other coping mechanisms for your happiness. Happiness isn't weighted in any of those things, and it's not weighted in someone else. It is weighted in you caring enough about yourself to build in the things in your life that bring you happiness, and move you out of the spaces in your life that bring you those painful feelings like loneliness or sadness. It's the willingness to do it for yourself, allowing yourself to do it, allowing yourself to reach out and stop listening to that judge or critic in there telling you, oh, they don't want to talk to you. That's your own negativity. Moving past that and knowing you deserve so much more. That's the space, that's the healthy space to move into, to get you out of the loneliness funk, and being aware that we all feel it at times. By far this year, I've really reached points where I felt lonely or I felt lost at different points. And that's because I had an immense amount of changes, a huge amount of healing work, and I got a bit lost. So I stopped connecting as much as I usually would. I stopped reaching out, and I found that me stepping back out of that and rising back up from that was hugely built in me caring enough about myself to reach out and make those connections, to say, you know, I'm not feeling great, or I'm a little lost, or I'm a little in a funk, or, you know, I'd love to meet up for a coffee, I need to have a chat, whatever it is. It's in the reaching out, it's in making those connections again, and remembering that that's all of us. We all feel lonely, we all get triggered by loneliness. It's what you do with those emotions that stops you feeling that way and moves you out of that space. So that's it for me for this week, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it and got some fabulous takeaways. And as always, I invite you to connect in with me across social media, or check me out on my website, www.yourgifttoyou.com, or email me, linda@yourgifttoyou.com, guys, because I'd love to hear from you, and any topics you'd like for us to talk about, or any more learnings that you want. And please remember, give me those reviews, because it keeps the podcast getting out there to more people. So chat to you very soon, guys. Bye bye.